we've got your travel fix with sneak peeks into dreamy destinations and tips to make the most of every mile. So, buckle up, roll down your windows, and let's make your drive feel like a getaway.
Welcome back to Wake and Wonder, and this is the second half of the show, and we are going to be focusing on African updates in terms of travel and tourism. And we'll also be looking in this hour, we're going to be looking at the visa fee increase by the uh, UK immigration, and some of these conversations we're going to be having. Mazino is going to be joining me back, and we're going to be expanding on a lot of things. Our guest is going to be coming in to catch in on that conversation on UK visa fee and who it affects and why and what. We'll be getting in on that. But right about now, it is time for us to take the continental brief and look at some of the developments in travel and tourism in Africa. And I just want to say, if you're just joining us back, I want to say thank you for joining us, and stay with us, go nowhere. Good morning, Wanderers. This is Continental Brief on Wake and Wonder, bringing you your Africa travel update. South Africa, Kenya, Ghana, Egypt, Morocco, Nigeria, Tunisia, and Uganda are all set to ride a wave of international visitors. The Tour Operators International Conference and Expo, TOIC, Toys 2026, coming this November 25th, is partnering with giants like Qatar Airways, Kenya Airways, and Marriott Hotels, promising promising to skyrocket flights, hotel bookings, and cross-border travel collaboration. Where will you be this November? From the bustling streets of Nairobi and Cape Town to cultural hubs in Lagos, Cairo, and Marrakesh, travelers can expect smoother flights, luxury hotels, expansions, and a surge in tourism experiences. Mark your calendar, November 25th, 2026, the conference itself, but the ripple effect is already underway as airlines and hotels prepare for the boom. Africa's tourism is transforming into a global powerhouse, creating jobs, boosting hospitality, and offering travelers rich cultural and adventures than ever before. Marriott Bonvoy has partnered with Ethiopian Airlines to link hotel stays and flight rewards under one seamless loyalty system. The collaboration connects Marriott's global hotel network with Africa's largest airline, a member of the Star Alliance. The partnership launches now, spanning over 145 destinations across Africa and thousands more globally. Travelers can now convert Sheba miles into hotel points or use hotel points for flights, unlocking a more flexible, personalized travel experience. This move signals a shift toward fully integrated journeys, boosting tourism flows into Africa while redefining how loyalty works across continent. And lastly, on a continental brief, from April 13 to 15, Cape Town in South Africa becomes the center of global tourism as the World Travel Market Africa 2026 lands at the Cape Town International Convention Center. The 3 day event brings together global travel leaders, tourism boards, airlines, and companies, including Lighthouse, Avis, Rate Hawk, and Micros South Africa, all focused on shaping the future of African travel. Running daily from 10 a.m., the summit will host high level discussions on tourism recovery, sustainability, and investment, while creating space for strategic partnerships and new travel deals. Industry players will also explore improving flight connectivity, boosting hotel innovation, and expanding African destinations to international markets, with buyers, exhibitors, and policymakers all in one place. WTM Africa continues to play a key role in driving global demand for African travel, positioning the continent as a leading destination for culture, business, and adventure. I beg your pardon, the last news on Continental Brief. South Africa and Angola are strengthening travel ties with South Africa's tourism minister Patricia de Lille, concluding a high level visit to Luanda aimed at unlocking growth between the two nations. The visit, held last week, focused on both governments and tourism sectors and a new 3-year tourism cooperation plan designed to boost investment, skills, and joint destination marketing. Crucial from March 24 or since March 24, 2026, both countries agreed to remove restrictions on passenger and cargo flights across routes linking South Africa and Angola. This move is expected to increase accessibility, travel demand, and trade flows. Officials say easier air access will drive tourism, create jobs, and strengthen business links across the region. Minister Delil says every additional flight opens doors for deeper connections as both countries now position themselves as linked destinations within Africa's growing travel economy. And through the coordinated marketing, investment pipelines, and skills development, the partnership aims to turn policy into real movement. More travelers, more opportunities, and a stronger African tourism network. That brings us to the end of Continental Brief this beautiful hour. We'll continue with the rest of the conversation we are going to be having on the Continental Brief segment on Wake and Wonder and another update in 20 minutes coming your way from looking into the Caribbean side of travel and updates. I'll be bringing the rest of my team into the house to join me for more conversation, and we'll be hoping our guest is already set to join us so that we can crack on some of the that we are going to be having in travel and tourism. Stay with us, go nowhere. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Moses. Our mission is to encourage, to educate, and to equip travelers. We want everyone to have an enjoyable, cost-effective, and culturally enriching travel experience because we think travelradio.live because we think that traveling is an effective way to learn more about different continents, their people, and their cultures. I love what I do, and yes, we have a great team. You should probably join us at travelradio.live.
I want to seize this opportunity to welcome everyone in the house. LD, Jenny, I see you. Mubarak, I see you. Mama Teta, I see you. Mother Tongue is in the house. Bookstar. And of course, AI Ninja, talking about our very Mazino Dixon. Maestro is in the house. Adebayo Love Super Bonte is also in the house. Shepard Oshifako is also joining us. And for everyone on the side of live, Libby Williams, I see you. Hi, Jeril George, I see you. Hi back. And how are you? I'm very fine. I'm very fine. It's spring in London. We're loving the beautiful sunny side. I mean, the bright side of life. I mean, it's beautiful. Outdoor starts as soon as possible. We need to go into those gardens and take beautiful Instagrammable photos. No, yeah. And my dad was in Africa. Beautiful. What part of Africa? Africa is a continent. It's big. Where in Africa did your dad go? I hope it's. I hope you don't mean Africa, the country. No, it's Africa, the continent. Mazino, is our guest ready to have this conversation about the UK visa? I mean, well, it's something we should also dive into this hour so we can crack on with the conversation on the development of UK immigration
Yes,
visa.
but also our guest that we was supposed to join us for the Atlantic trade is also ready.
All right, let's
So I
crack
don't know
on.
if
Yes, let's crack
yes.
on it.
So I've sent this the TikTok handle on the discussion panel. So is there? So once you just
Can
add it,
you
it will
please
come
put
up.
it back again on the
Okay, I'll do that.
discussion passions? Sorry, area section so that I can find it. Or otherwise, you can just mention the name so I look up for it. And please, you can send an invite so that we can add him to the house so we can have this conversation. Um, Interestingly, while we are waiting for that, I'm gonna let Mazino also open the conversation with our guests on the transatlantic slave trade and everything that it entails. We need to touch on a lot of things. We've got a lot of questions, and then shortly we'll be having our guests also to have a conversation with us on UK immigration visa fee. All right, Mazino, still there?
Yes, I'm still here. I'm still here.
All right.
So I've sent his handle, so you can just add him now. So he will come up live because he's one of the drafters of that particular resolution, and it will be nice to hear from him.
Is it on
Exactly how it went.
is it on the TikTok discussion?
Hey, TikTok, yes. Yes.
Can
I've
you
put
just
it
tell me
twice.
the name so I can find it?
Okay.
I'm David Hundain. I live in Lagos, Nigeria, and I listen to Travel Radio Live. I listen to Travel Radio Live.
Oh, somebody's asking, how did you get here? I used a small boat, I guess. You know, the big ships came over to Africa, taught me the syllables, and then I used a small boat to cross over, not the plane, not the visa. Yeah, and that's how I got to London. All right, Mazino, where are we? All right, so we're going to be having a conversation with one of the drafters of the slave trade resolutions. He's a Ghanaian lawyer, international lawyer, and he drafted this resolution. And I'm excited that we're going to be having this talk with him. And we're going to be looking at some of the aspects, some of the areas like the recognition and the classification, reparation and justice, impact on Black and African communities, education and historic narrative of it, policy and global accountability, voice and representation. Mazino, where are we? So we can crack on this.
Okay. Well, I've sent his handle again, so it's just for you to.
What is the name?
Add
Can
him
you tell me the name?
live.
The
Yes.
name of the handle.
The name of the
All right, I'm waiting for them to get. We're using our TikTok to get in our guests into the discussion panel so that we can just continue to have. I mean, we can carry on with the conversation. All right, we're still waiting there. All right, so we're asking questions like: should the transatlantic slave trade be formally declared a crime against humanity or the gravest crime in human history? It has been debated even by the very Tory leader, Kemi Badenoch, that UK should have voted against, not abstained. Um, and I wonder why, especially knowing that she's Black. And of course, it's also impacted Nigeria. And that's why we have the slave trade area and some monuments. I've been there. in Badagry in Lagos. I was there and I saw some of the shackles, some of the chains, in fact, and how people were sold for just with mirrors. The mirrors were there. A lot of things that were shocking. Like you would just you were price freedom over slavery, over oppression, over subjugation. I mean, it's interesting. Saw the boats, the what the boats look like. We walk through the point of no return where you get to, and there's a place I think you take water, and that's it. And then they load you up on the ship, and then it's goodbye, au revoir, and that's it. And I don't know. We're still waiting for our guest. Okay, he's here. Oliver is here, and then we will be having a conversation right about now. Interesting. So, interesting. Oliver is here now. I'll just let Mazino do the introduction. Oliver, welcome to Wake and Wonder this beautiful hour. How are you? How are you, sir?
I'm doing very well. I hope you can hear me.
Absolutely loud and clear. Mazino, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you so much. Mr. Oliver, thank you so much for joining us on Wake and Wonder. Of course, Africa was agog with excitement and pride as His Excellency President John Mahama delivered the message to the world. Transatlantic slave trade is evil, the greatest crime against humanity. And you were the one of the drafters of that particular resolution. Could you walk us through how the whole idea was conceived, how you eventually went about getting the full resolution, and your feeling as a Ghanaian and a Nigerian, as an African, seeing His Excellency speaking to the world and the world listening?
Um, Listen, you're absolutely correct that being Ghanaian, I'm at once Nigerian as well, and in fact, broad African. The process to get here, the conversation around what to do with the legacy of the transatlantic slave trade has been with us as Africans for a very long time. The conversations about how it is recognized in the world, the questions about around reparations, and all of these conversations have been going on for decades. And so it is fair to acknowledge the work that others have done before us, conversations within the African Union, conversations within the Caribbean community as well, in terms of what is the way forward. And so, in fact, getting this to this point is a build up on all of the works from the past that various countries and statesmen have been talking about for a long time. Last year, in September, I think, the president of Ghana before the UN made a promise that Ghana would be thinking of bringing forward a resolution to recognize the transatlantic slave trade as the gravest crime against humanity. Now, of course, when he made the comments, that caught all of us off guard. It seemed ahead of its time. And then also, in terms of the timelines he had given, it seemed impossible knowing how the UN system is, the decades it takes to negotiate, to get a broad coalition in place, and all of that. But the foreign ministry took it as its marching orders. They were able to bring. Myself, I'm not with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I used to be. I used to be assistant director of legal affairs there, but I've moved on from there. And they brought on people like myself and other people from many other countries to come consult on the process and the way forward. And then it came down to research, one historical research to be able to be absolutely watertight in terms of the developments of law, the state of the law in Europe at the time, the fact that slavery was not legal, and that's one of the arguments that people continue to make, that no, it was legal at the time, but absolutely not. And we know that it was not legal at the time because they were not trading in white individuals. And so they were clear that slavery was inhuman. The question was whether or not they were ready to recognize the humanity of the African, which was not the case. So we had to be able to ensure that the development and our account of history was spot on. Then it came to the question of whether or not we were coming to say that slavery was one of the greatest crimes against humanity, or that it was the gravest crime against humanity. Um, and this, of course, was one of the sticky points in the negotiations throughout all of it, because inherent in the idea of saying that it is one of the gravest, the question for us ourselves is that what are we counting within that box that we believe that it compares in scale and magnitude? We have to answer that question for ourselves. And when we say that it is the gravest, are we absolutely certain in our minds that nothing compares? Now, we have to first acknowledge the history. The transatlantic slave trade went on for 400 years. There's not a single thing in human history that has endured in terms of a crime against humanity, that have endured in its scale, its magnitude, and which has in fact shaped the world as much as the transatlantic slave trade did. And so there was no question in our minds that this was in fact, the gravest crime against humanity. The another sticking point was the question of reparations. And it is in a way tied to the same arguments that it was legal at the time and things like that, and for which reason reparations would not be due. But the funny thing is that the question of reparations for crimes is not new in international relations and international politics. The Germans are paying reparations for the Holocaust. They started paying reparations for the first genocide of the world, which happened in Namibia, where people were killed, decapitated, their heads sent to Germany. And so it's not a new concept in itself. Even worse, that several Western powers paid slaveholders reparations in order to separate them from slaves. So in fact, those who were deemed worthy of reparations were the enslavers who were paid for this. Right. So that's one of the conversations. But I think for me, the most mature and even humane aspect of the conversation is the ways in which we were deliberate about expanding the conversation beyond monetary compensation. Because one of the things that our marching orders that we had was that, listen, the transatlantic slave trade was about the commercialization of humans. And we cannot reduce the conversation about how we recognize its impact, how we do right by our ancestors, by focusing on money. It is broader than that. It is cultural repair. It is a vision of the world that depends on and recognizes the humanity of those whose life were so torn apart. That is what we need to focus on, we were told. And so a lot of the conversation, and one of the only thing that the resolution demands with absolutely no compromise was the return of cultural artifacts. The fact that these people walked into our palaces, they walked into our places of worship and took away objects that symbolize communities away was a big thing for us. And so it demands that there has to be a prompt and unhindered restitution of cultural artifacts that were taken away from the continent. In addition to that, it is demanding that the conversation, our recognition of the magnitude of the crime is only one step. The next step is deciding together what the framework for reparative justice looks like, and that is a process that must be designed together with Latin America, with the CARICOM, which is the Community of Caribbean Countries, and the African Union, and that we have to be absolutely clear what it looks like. The suggestions, of course, in the resolution also talking about, the need for funding more research and its impact in the world for people to also understand, and how we put in place the memorial aspects of this as well, which is how do we ensure that people continue to remember and that people do not forget this. Now, in terms of the diplomacy, one of the key things that was done was to go to the AU and get AU endorsement for this. And so we were able to get the African Union. I was in Addis with the president, in getting the African Union to back this so that all African states would be on board in terms of the way forward. Speaking to our colleagues in the Caribbean community, who already have a Caribbean Reparations Commission,
Mm.
which has developed a 10-point agenda for how reparations should happen. And then also ensuring that we have the Latin American, for instance, countries like Colombia, which has a huge black population, Brazil, which has the largest black population in that hemisphere, all part of the coalition. And so that we got them into the coalition. Now, through it all, the people who refused to engage and decided that the two most critical elements of the resolution ought to go before they would back it were Europe, which is that they did not want to recognize it as the gravest crime against humanity, and they were demanding that any talk about reparation should be out of the resolution. So that in essence, what we would have is symbolic language, oh sad, and so therefore, I don't know what, like it was essentially to water down the instrument in a way that seemed palatable and comfortable, that it becomes not a transformative legal instrument, but just political speech, which we refused to back down on. And ultimately, they made a decision that they were going to abstain from the vote. They ended up, of course, doing that.
Mr. Oliver,
Then there
can
was
I
the
ask a
Israelis
question
as
quickly,
well.
please?
Yes, please.
Why has it taken so long for global institutions to reach consensus on this?
That's a very good question. That's a very good question. I do think that sometimes some things may feel like we all know it, but then there's a lack of initiative. One, a state or somebody to bring the project forward and then confront us with it. And I think that's kind of what's been missing. That it was always assumed, but until you sat down to elaborate, that you begin to see, in fact, the opposition and also understand that, well, this thing that you thought that everybody was agreed and aligned upon, well, it wasn't that simple. And that so many other people did not necessarily agree with you in terms of the way forward. So I think the lack of initiative in some regard was also one of the reasons why.
You mentioned something about, you've touched on comparing or recognizing other historic atrocities, and which is interesting from different parts of the hemisphere. But let's look at the reparation and justice. Is there anything in mind apart from financial payment or apologies? Is there a framework already for Africans to make demands?
There's a conversation now, and I'm seeing that happen as to, particularly on the questions of reparations, who is entitled to what? Okay. And there's some conversations, in fact, about, well, and I've seen this happen as well, that, well, some African countries or some African communities were involved in the transatlantic slave trade. And so whether or not they should be part of the reparations conversation. And I've seen this evoked by detractors, where people are trying to stop the forward march of the conversation and how we go about this. And I need to be absolutely clear. The question about repair and who must repair is a conversation that entails all of us, those of us in Africa and those in the West. That each country must determine for themselves how they repair. I'll give you an example. In Ghana, the ways in which that repair is happening is the recognition of what we call heritage-based citizenship. That any person from the African descent who can produce a DNA that shows any part of them comes from Africa, it doesn't matter the percentage, comes from Ghana, they're entitled to citizenship. So many of our colleagues from the Caribbeans have profited from this, and from African Americans have come to Ghana, have been settled. They've been given a right of settlement. The government is facilitating the ability to acquire land and return home. And so the year of return, for instance, that Ghana initiated was not just coming to Africa to come and party for a few days, but in fact recognizing that you have a right to be able to be back home, which is essential to us in our conversation. We have also seen, for instance, various chiefs in Ghana at various events that the government has held come out and apologize for their role of, their ancestors, some of the ancestors, slave merchants in the trade. That repair, we need it for ourselves to be at peace with our own ancestors. We do not require Europe to lead that conversation for us. And we are doing that across board. Now, it doesn't detract from the fact that those who designed the system, those who brought money, insurance, ships, and for whom it was a major foreign policy to enslave Africans, bear a role and responsibility in this. And also, let me, so that you can answer the questions as well. Let me just highlight, even in connection with the genocide that happened, the Holocaust, there were Jewish collaborators. There were persons who ran Jewish ghettos, who helped put Jews on trains that were sent to extermination camps. Nobody in their right mind say that the fact of the victim participation in this, they disarticulates or removes their claim for justice. Absolutely not. And so let us be clear that yes, there were African slave merchants, but they do not get to own the African story, and they do not speak for the entirety of the Africans in terms of this conversation as well. Now, whether Europe comes around the table despite their decision to abstain from the vote is a question for them and for European electorates to hold their governments accountable, to recognize the past in terms of the votes that they went to express. And I've already seen that conversation happening, where so many people are already offended that their governments abstained from the vote.
Interesting. I mean, I am very interested in the side of Africa now. You mentioned something about each country would talk about what is beneficiary to them. Is there a way you can help us point out or list out countries affected in Africa? Of course, we know mostly West Africa, but are there countries who are also making reparation as to slave trade resolution in Africa that you can mention countries?
Yeah, so I mean, particularly on the West African coast was the main slavers coast. From Ghana, Benin, Togo, Nigeria. On the other side, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, all these countries were affected by the transatlantic slave trade. And in fact, as part of the African Union conversations, a key part of what all these states agreed to put into the resolution was demand that all countries take steps within their national laws to put in place frameworks that recognize their way or the ways in which they're going to take action to repair. In fact, I have talked about Ghana's year of return and things like that, but Nigeria has also been very big on the return and for people to be able to come back home. And in fact, symbolic Nigerian passports have been given to African Americans who have come down to visit in order to be able to create that cultural community. So I think that what you're going to see more, particularly within the African Union, is a continental-based framework where we commit to specific steps we're going to be taking the way forward. And let me say this: what you are seeing now happen is a defining a new international world order. If you followed what has happened in the past, now that the global rule-based order has now been torn apart with what Trump is doing and other things, you saw the Canadian Prime Minister go to Davos and say that, listen, we as middle powers, as he called it, have been complicit in the ways in which smaller countries have been exploited. And we must own that shame as well. Almost immediately, Marco Rubio, U.S. Secretary of State, went to Munich and went to say that we have no apology to make, that the and its best work was in the conquer of the world, colonization, and there's no apology to be given. That's a particular vision of what they have of us and what they value as their own civilization. Now, what we are then proposing forward is a new vision that is built on empathy, recognizing the pain of the past, and thinking about how we repair that. That is a vision that is sympathetic, that stands and is in contrast with what the West envisions itself to be. So I am really excited of what Africa can do with this, and I do hope that we all bring our hands on board to push and to support our countries in this regard. I've also written where I've talked about so many times, many of us look at the dysfunction and the fact that we're angry at our leaders, that we don't recognize why they need our support for such an important global conversation. This is our humanity. And we can put aside the many ways in which we are frustrated with our leaders to recognize that we're in front of something historic that must be pushed and moved ahead.
Totally agree with you, but I'd like to. I mean, Mazino, you're in the house, so it's also open for you to weigh in. But let me just ask this
Yes.
before. Can I just quickly ask this question? I mean, Mr. Oliver, I mean, you just raised a point about something that's got to do with impact on Black and African communities. Is it possible to pin it to one or two things? Maybe modern travel, maybe migration, maybe border policies, as to how it impacts on Black and African communities?
So one of the things that this is talking about is a reform of so many things. One, the global trading order. In terms of the WTO rules and things like that, they have to go under significant reform that takes account of the legacy of why their countries where some are only natural resource producers and others are, our economies are essentially at the service of Europe. And that comes from a particular structure that has continued to this day. We have to have a conversation also about even climate change. The fact that Western and so many countries developed run industries at the expense of us, and now we are all being asked to pay the climate burden together. Those require reform as well in terms of how international law works. The conversation around, and I talked about the cultural artifacts and the return of them, it also needs further elaboration. Then, of course, the ability to study and what we're able to study on, and the funding of research, and who talks about what and who shapes the story, who shapes the narrative and tells the African story is part of the reparative framework of which students are being funded. So many times you see, even in terms of research that concerns we as Africans, research resources exist only in Western universities that they are able to then fund themselves to come and research on us to tell our story. So the ways in which funding moves for research is also a key part of the conversation as well. So this is an attempt to holistically rewrite the world, and I believe that this is only a first step, and the way in which we elaborate this would even go beyond us and even will definitely outlive us. But we have given a nod to future generations, the direction in which it will take to restore the African.
Mazino.
Okay. I wanted to ask Mr. Oliver, you were trying to mention about the countries that voted against, specifically Israel. I wanted you to just elaborate on that particular aspect.
So three countries voted against the resolution. The United States of America, Israel, and then Argentina. Now let's take each of them individually. The United States, was a big corporate in the transatlantic slave trade. In fact, when the rest of the Western Europe and everybody else had outlawed slavery, they didn't. It had to take a civil war in America led by Abraham Lincoln for slavery to end in the US. And even that, it put in place a whole regime of Jim Crow laws that, Africans were still being dehumanized for a very long time. Now, the reason why the US abstained, it can only be down to the orange man in the White House. That you think that it's a particular vision of the world that they have. And so I am not surprised in any shape or form that they took this step. In fact, the day before the General Assembly vote, Ghana held a high-level panel discussion on this thing. By the time we were done by 3 p.m., their mission in Ghana had sent a note to the Ghanaian Foreign Ministry protesting the fact that the US is mentioned. So they were very clear in their opposition to anything that, deals with this issue. And it's almost laughable and ironic that on the General Assembly floor, the US representative came to talk about how Donald Trump is the best president that has ever happened to African Americans in the world. He has done more for African Americans. It was like, read the room, child. Read the room.
Read the room.
So the US is dealing with particular politics at this stage. That we hope that when administration changes, that the Black African, the Black Congressional Caucus that supported us and African American leaders that supported and were there at the UN for this can push their government to take a more progressive stance on this. For Israel, that had no slave involvement history, it's a bit strange. Israel itself is a strange country. Everybody can agree that for a country that has known genocide to now be involved in things that a lot of people say is genocidal in many respects in terms of their policies in Gaza and what they have done in Gaza, it's surprising to me. But I've heard the Israeli ambassador to Ghana say something along the lines of, for them, the Holocaust is the gravest crime against humanity, and for which reason they didn't want to concede this to slavery. Now, this is what it.
Mazino, I think we just lost. Okay, Mr.
Hello,
Oliver
can
is
you hear
back.
me?
Yes, you're back.
Yes. So one of the things that I find maybe hilarious in some regard, perhaps as an international lawyer, is because conceptually in international law, there's a difference between crimes against humanity and genocide. The two are not the same. Okay, crimes against humanity is slavery, murder, rape, things like that. That international law. And if you cannot find a way to agree that the transatlantic slave trade, which went on for 400 years, is graver than, I don't know, rape and murder, then I don't know what calculation you are making. Now, genocide is a different whole concept. And this is not about that. And even if it was about comparing, we are talking about millions of people over 400 years who then not only were they sold, went into chattel slavery for so many years, and build the Western world. If you can't find a way to saving that and it's only about you, then you fail to be able to have empathy beyond yourself. And it's only about centering yourself all the time. Is Argentina Argentina is a strange one. I mean, so many people have talked about, the extermination of black people in Argentina, racism in Argentina for so long. The country itself never explained its vote, has not said anything about it so far. So it's very difficult to speculate as to what their reasoning was on this issue.
Interesting. May I ask this question quickly? Should there be a global standard for teaching the transatlantic slave trade in schools, especially in Africa, looking at education and historic narrative?
That's a very good question, because the way in which something is taught, the way it's spoken about, can reveal a lot of biases. And I think that a lot of that bias has already set in. One of the things that we talked about at the UN was the fact that now there's different kinds of curriculum in the US in particular, where it is being referred to as workers were brought from Africa to come and help work in the farms in the US. Workers, they call them, not enslaved people. So there's an attempt to whitewash even the transatlantic slave trade. And my hope is that the the effort in trying to bring about more research and more scholarship on this would help. Now, there's no global framework for how, there are standardized curricula around the world. But I think that is something which Africa, acting through UNESCO, can be able to develop, a generally agreed resource for the international community as to how to account for slavery and talk about it and how it has an effect on educational content in various countries. So I think that's a very important point.
Mazino, I just want to ask my own last question. So, as we're gradually coming to a close of this segment, but this has to Mr. Oliver. First of all, I can't wait to visit Ghana now. I can't wait to visit Ghana. Thank you for the conversation. First of all, I mean, this is touching and it is deeply, deeply, deeply resonating. I've been to the slave trade point of no return in Lagos Badagry, and I know for a fact that it's something that just brings back memory, seeing human beings sold for just mirror. It's amazing. So I'm going to ask this one: how should destinations link to slavery in terms of say forts, ports, plantations, be preserved and presented, and how can we turn all of these to a kind of heritage tourism and a kind of tool, which I know Ghana is doing for healing. Ghana is doing it. I've seen footage, videos of people crying, notable African American celebrities coming to cry about remembrance and of their heritage. And how do we all put this together going forward, knowing that it has been recognized as a form of travel, tourism, and cultural heritage?
Again, a very, very, very good and important question. One of the things that we have not been able to do is the linking of the slave route for us to see, the coastal placements of all these forts and castles that were used in the slave trade. And so far, and that's one of the things I'm looking forward to, the conversation has been too domestic in terms of even we in the various African countries that we have not regionalized the conversation as the West African framework for how we link the slave route from Lagos down to Dakar, for us to be able to see the route and encourage more even regional interregional tourism for even ourselves. The work and the funding that needs to go from a regional level, the preservation of these historical artifacts and ensuring that they do not fall to ruins. There's a lot of money involved in maintaining them. All of that funding that needs to come in into ensuring that they continue to stay as legacies for people to visit, for us to be able to inculcate and incorporate that in our own educational curriculum, ensuring that our students go there. Because there's so many people in our countries that have not even visited any of these places, that these are commitments that we have to be able to make to enhance knowledge and understanding from our own people as well of some of the things that took place. And also importantly, there's something that our president said, which says that, a big part of repair and reparations is also language. That many of us continue to talk about these people, we call them slaves, as if it was part of their identity, rather than enslaved people who were enslaved by others. So even how we talk about the past and how we recognize their own humanity, it's a journey for us as well to be able to go on and make sure that this is holistic in many respects. But you make a very valid point in terms of the work and the cultural artifacts that needs to be preserved on the continent and in West Africa in particular.
Mazino, trust me, I have a lot of questions, but I'll just let you have it so we can just bring this to a close. And I hope Mr. Oliver is going to come back. Please come back because there's still a lot to talk about. Mazino, we can hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. Thank you, Mr. Oliver, for your time. And definitely, Wake and Wonder will always call on you for topical issues. Once again, thank you.
Mr. Oliver, I have an idea and I would like to present my idea to you. And I think talking about why you were talking, the idea just popped in, and it's something that has got to do with that preservation of cultural heritage. And it's something I'd love to share with you. And let's see how we can expand on this and make this another kind of journey, as I know that hopefully this will continue to bring about a binding international policies based on the resolutions and that has been taking place that took place in the United Nations. Mr. Oliver, I really want to thank you for coming on today's episode of Wake and Wonder.
I thank you as well. I do hope that travel radio would also travel to some of these sites and maybe broadcast from there as part of enlightening people as well about some of these things.
Definitely.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And there you have it. That's Mr. Oliver, and he has been taking us on the journey of the United Nations resolution as it relates to this recognizing the slave trade, transatlantic slave trade. I mean, this is so important in a time like this. Mr. Oliver Barker is a Ghanaian international lawyer and founding partner of Merton and Everett LLP, Accra. He has worked at the International Court of Justice and the United Nations Office of Legal Affairs, served as Assistant Director in the International Law Section of Ghana's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and advised the Office of the President on treaty commitments and multilateral diplomacy. Thank you so much. Mazino, what's your take?
Yes, that
I
was a
love
great
brilliant
one.
mind.
Absolutely brilliant, and he really out everything. And I guess listeners, viewers have a better understanding of what has transpired and what that resolution is all about. And also, we need for Africans to begin to understand the concept of self-preservation and stop being slaves to religious, because that's one of the problems. You see a lot of Africans when you talk about slave trade, whether it's from the transatlantic or the trans-Sahara, religion comes into play, and you see one side say, "Oh, you're talking about this side. What about the other side?" And that's why that's where we miss it. That on the global stage, religion is just your personal matter. There is the global village, and there is self-preservation and interest. So Ghana has put Africa on the map, and I'm happy Africa supported that move, and justice will come at the end of the day.
All right, we're open.
I just hope we'll have enough time to talk about the UK visa.
I mean, if we can jump right at it right now, I am so happy for us to do that. Is in the house that yeah, that's Tommy, right?
Tommy, yes.
Awesome.
Tommy's in the house.
Tommy, okay, he's still buffering. We're waiting for him, but let's expand on that quickly. So that takes us to a close. So the UK government is increasing the visa fees, and we're wondering why. A visitor's visa now £135. A student visa is now £558. If I remember very well, a country that was charging up to that amount used to be Australia, almost that amount rather. It used to be Australia for the student visa. Okay, I'm having a little difficulty in bringing Tommy into the house. I will try again, so we can really just talk about it. Aya Kisheta is in the house. I see you. Tapa Amit, I see you. Evelyn, thank you. I see you. Okay. So I am wondering exactly. So the question is the UK government trying to run its economy by immigrants' money? I don't know. Tommy, welcome to Wake and Wonder. Can you take us through what you think or what you can say about the policy as to the visa fees that has been increased by the UK immigration?
Good morning, and thanks for having me here.
Thank you for coming.
I think, I actually think there's a lot to say about it, but I'll try to keep it short and simple.
Okay.
But off of the wake of the visit of the president to the UK, ordinarily one would imagine diplomatically that that should help in certain areas, and many analysts would have rather stood with the idea that the president was nothing, didn't really have a positive, as it were. Albeit there would be some. It's almost impossible that his visit is totally non-profiting, as I could put it that way. But ordinarily, that is quite a significant message, owing to the fact that you are visiting a country. Let's not even talk about the country being your former colonial masters, as it were. Then you're visiting, and the next thing you are getting back from such a country is increase in visa fees. Personally, I don't think that speaks well enough, because that sounds like a loud message that whatever it is, we could say it's still diplomatic conversations around it and all that. But the fact that it's happening just around the time, just a few days after the presidential visit to the United Kingdom, it speaks volume of the relationship or how they actually view the country, Nigeria as a whole.
Don't you think
And
that UK
during
is
the course
going to
of my
hag you?
research,
It's
I
just a
was
quick
actually
one.
thinking maybe the visa Please, can you hear me, please?
I can hear you, but I was going to ask though that don't you think UK is going to argue that it is not just Nigeria, it is just a policy that affects every immigrant? Don't you think they will argue that? Okay. Why would it give exception to Nigeria?
Okay, so that was what I was just going to. Okay, so that was what I was just going to ask, because in the course of my research, I have not been able to find that this visa fee increment cuts across all other immigrants. I would imagine it shouldn't be stereotyped to immigrants alone. However,
we are losing Tommy there, and fortunately, we're coming to the end of this segment. I can't wait to have Tommy back so that we can really have more on this conversation on the UK visa increment and who it affects and how it affects you and I. Because again, we're looking at a big amount of fees placed on immigrants, and it does feel that immigrants are going to be funding the system heavily. And also looking at it, I mean, international students, skilled workers, tourists, especially from Africa, Asia, and the Caribbean, are going to be paying a lot more of this because a lot of other countries have visa waivers. And some of the countries that have got visa waivers in Africa has been withdrawn. So on a close, really, we can't wait to come back on this conversation because also don't forget that there's going to be also payment in terms of English test, life in the UK test, not to mention health surcharge for students that are coming in or for skilled worker coming in, and all of this costs money. So these are conversations to have. How much should immigrants should be paying, or how much squeeze are they going to have on immigrants to fund the system? So these are conversations that are yet to have for us to have, and I do hope that Tommy is going to be available again for us next week, Monday, so that we can have this conversation and look into some of these and raise some of the issues. And I just want to thank everyone who has been. Mazino, thank you very much, and would have been great to have more time on this topic. But we've got to go. And I just want to thank you, Success. Thank you, Charity. And thank you, everyone who's been part of this today's conversation on Wake and Wonder. Please do join us again next week for more conversation. And let's hope that we can have a more interesting conversation on issues regarding the continent, regarding travel and tourism.
Every week we go through exams daily. No, I'm not motivating.
You're motivated.
I'm not.
It's Trump power drum.
Ukraine should be allowed to do whatever he wants to do. It's a country.